Hello and welcome to the latest Blood Red podcast from the Liverpool Echo. I'm Joe Rimmer and today is Friday the 13th and that might be unlucky for some, but not for me because I'm joined by three of the Echo's finest to discuss all things Reds. First of all, our Liverpool reporter, both home and away, Paul Gorst. How are we, Paul?
All good, Joe. All good.
Nice to see you.
Yeah, I knew. I was at Klopp's press conference today, which we're going to get stuck into, and a bit of a mundane one turned into a bit of a spicy one towards the end. So I'm looking forward to getting stuck into that.
Yeah, we certainly will. I'll come back to you on that in just a minute. But first of all, Theo Squires, how are you?
Yeah, I'm all good. It's been an interesting week, hasn't it, on and off the pitch for the Reds? As Gorsty says, press conference has given us something to talk about at least. Certainly a spiky one. So if you've not seen it, go and watch Jurgen Klopp's answer there. There's plenty to talk about.
Yeah, just wait until the end is what I'd say. I think that is the last question, isn't it, that he sort of goes off on. Yeah, we'll get to that in a sec. And our Merseyside women's reporter, Beth Lindop, making only her second, I'm right in saying, second Blood Red appearance?
My third, actually. I'm a
third, sorry. Yeah. How are you?
Yeah, good. It'd be better if Liverpool win tomorrow, but yeah, no, I'm good, thank you.
Yeah, 2 Liverpool wins this weekend. I think you'd prefer, wouldn't you?
Oh yeah, that.
Right, okay, Gorsty, we'll start with you. You were up at the AXA Training Centre to see Jurgen Klopp and his press conference. It was all sort of, like you say, mundane until that final question from Pierre's Carl Markham, who's got he's got the most disarming voice in the business, I think, Carl. Whenever I listen to those press conferences, you know him well. I've never met him in person, but I always think he's got that great voice for it. But Klopp wasn't really happy with what he asked. Do you want to just take us through what Carl asked and why Klopp didn't seem too pleased with it?
Yeah, I mean, you might not be surprised, but I'm siding on the side of the reporter on this one. I think Klopp was a little bit heavy-handed with the response. I think Vinny O'Connor from Sky Sports initially asked Klopp basically what's happening with the rest of the January business, and Klopp essentially ruled it all out. And then Carl at the end just said, if you're ruling out transfers, what's the reason for that? Are you happy with your squad? Is it a financial thing, or can you just kind of explain what it is? And Klopp just kind of said, look, I've had 6,000 press conferences here, and you've been here for about 5,998 of them. You'll know by now it's a money thing. How can I say it any more clear? It's type of thing. And there's a little bit of a heavy-handed response. As we said, if you haven't seen it, go back and check the club's official YouTube channel. It's on there. It's the last question, the last answer. And he was just getting sick and tired of having the transfer question thrown at him every time the window was open. He should know the dance by now, shouldn't he? He's been here for 7 years, and every time that the window was open, be it between July and the end of August or be it January, he's always getting asked about plans. And I think at the moment, it's probably more acute than it's ever been, given that there's a desperation now, isn't there, for fans to see a new midfielder coming in. I would actually say it is getting quite desperate. You're seeing new names linked on a daily basis, and at the moment, normally you see 1 or 2 links and you think automatically, maybe, kind of from an educated point of view, you think, well, that's a little bit far-fetched, or couldn't really see Liverpool going for him. But at the moment, it's a bit of an open season, isn't it? And anyone you see getting linked to Liverpool, you look at it and you think twice, and you think, oh, well, maybe there's some legs in there. We'll have to start digging around that one and chasing things up and whatever else. Because, they certainly do need a central midfielder, and Klopp didn't completely shut the door, did he? Kind of left it ajar, saying if there's something that we can do, then we'll do it. And given that they went in for Arthur Melo on transfer deadline.
Have you both lost Gorsty there? Paul, we've lost you. If you can hear us, and I'm sorry.
Yeah,
hang on, he's back. Let's come back.
The fact that they brought in Arthur Melo on transfer deadline day, and going back a couple of years, they brought in Ozan Kabak on loan and Ben Davies from the Championship. You can't really rule out too much these days with Liverpool's transfer links, especially when they are in need of something. So I suppose watch this space would be my advice, but I'm not expecting anything major in the ilk of a 50, 60, 70 million pound midfielder. I think they do something that will be very much short-term stopgap, but Liverpool's recent history with that has proven to be quite awful, really, hasn't it? Arthur Melo's only played 13 minutes, so Ozan Kabak didn't get kept on even at half the price that he was offered to Liverpool. And Ben Davies didn't kick a ball, so we'll see. But I thought it was a little bit heavy-handed from Klopp on that particular response. But I'm sure there might be a legion of supporters who disagree.
Yeah, Theo, I agree with Gorsty. I thought it was a fair enough question. It was a really good question from Carl, who asked what a lot of supporters want to know. If not a midfielder now, then why? Is it is it money? Is it personnel? What are the reasons? But Klopp seems to sort of maybe deliberately, I don't know. I'm jumping to conclusions there, but seemed to misinterpret, didn't he, the question, and talked a little bit about the attack. Do you think there's a bit of frustration from the Reds boss about not being able to add to his midfield deep down?
Yeah, I think so. I think he is frustrated. Like in the past, there has been plenty of scrutiny about Liverpool and FSG and what they do in the transfer market. You think when they won the Champions League, wasn't it? They only brought in 2 goalkeepers on free transfers and a couple of kids, and then it was Minamino in the mid-season. After the Premier League, it was just it was the year after when they lost all the centre backs. They had to wait, and then just got Konate. It's always been this limited incomings, and it's from when they've been in a position of strength. And fans have criticised that, going, now is the time to fully go in and strengthen your squad, and they haven't. And they said, "Well, judge us on the pitch." And for so long, they've been getting the results, and it's been fine. But now they're not getting the results on the pitch, and it seems that they need these strengthenings and this revamp more than ever. But their hands are still tied. They don't have the finances for whatever reason to go out and get whoever they want. The players that they perhaps do want aren't available, and it's just made it this situation. I think you can tell Klopp's feeling the pressure a little bit, because it's the first time really, apart from the second half of that COVID season, where Champions League really looks in peril. And it's one where if they don't make in the Champions League, well, then you're risking not getting Jude Bellingham, not getting any of your other senior targets, and you're in an even weaker position. And it's one where Klopp's not daft. Yes, he's frustrated, but he'll want to have strengthened the squad too. If the money is there, he would have done it. He's going to have had these talks with FSG, and he's probably not going to have liked the answer he's got. He'll have a better understanding of it than any of us. But he's just taking it out on the wrong man, hasn't he? Because he's fed up of being asked these questions when he's probably not happy with the answers. And it was quite telling that he did seem to misinterpret it, whether that was deliberate or he was just pointing it in the other direction. Because he was going about forwards, going, "Oh, we've got all these players who are injured, but they'll be back. We go and sign another one just to cover it." It's like, well, no one's asking you to go and sign another forward. You've just signed Cody Gakpo. You've got, 6 players there when they're all fit. And he seems to be a bit creative with the numbers when it suits him, like whether he counts Oxlade-Chamberlain as a forward, Fabio Carvalho, whether they're senior players or not. It's always when it suits that narrative when he's on the defensive. It seems a little bit, maybe a bit harsh, that he's getting the excuses in early. Like if Liverpool don't finish in the top 4 this season and they miss out on the Champions League, they want the excuse to be, but we gave it a good go. It's not our fault. We've had all these injuries and look how close we've gone. They don't want it to be, the club dropped the ball here. They made a big mistake by not strengthening within all these other windows and then not going and getting a midfielder. That big question is why? And that's why Carl Markham's asked this question. Why have Liverpool not got the funds to? Is it just because the right player is not available and you're waiting? Or would you move if there was more money there? And we can all have a suspicion of why, whether it links to FSG looking for investment or even selling the club and all these other things that we will talk about. But they're the only ones who can directly answer it. And then Jurgen Klopp's the messenger. And obviously he didn't want to answer it today. He didn't want to play ball. But you just wanted that clear confirmation from why are you not going for a midfielder this January, Is it because the money isn't there? But then any answer he gives, it's going to have a negative knock-on effect. It's not going to give Liverpool good headlines. It's going to have more pressure on the team, more pressure on FSG. And he got frustrated, took it out on the journalists. It's not the first time. It won't be the last.
Yeah, well, Beth, I mean, we are talking about finances there, and we're assuming that perhaps Liverpool don't have them to sign someone in this window. But that is an assumption. And would it help if FSG, who have spoken quite a bit, Tom Werner's been speaking in the press in Boston this week. Obviously, it's the off season, I think, there, and they've signed a huge new contract, haven't they? The Red Sox. Would it help if FSG came out and cleared these things up a little bit? I mean, the club is in a strange position because there was the reports that they wanted to sell. Then that's been moved on a little bit so that they're looking for investment and would be open to a sale. But we don't hear a lot from them at the moment, and they often speak in the off season. But is this something that they really should make their position clear on now?
Yeah, I think so. I think, just a little bit more transparency would probably be helpful. I think, so as Theo said, they're sort of, I think if Klopp were to come out and be completely honest and not deflect sort of the attention away from FSG and maybe a lack of funds, then, you know, the headlines would be pretty negative. And I think obviously, you know, the club is sort of, there's a little bit of uncertainty surrounding things, obviously, with the potential investment, looking for investors, looking to partially sell or fully sell. So I think it would be helpful from a fan's perspective to get a little bit more clarity about, you know, whether there are funds available. Or I think sort of the interesting thing is, you know, Cody Gakpo has come in, and obviously, you know, in light of that injury to Darwin Nunes and Firmino not being back in training, that's, you know, helpful to have him as an option. But I think if you'd have asked anyone ahead of this window, where would you rather that money be spent, I think everybody would have said midfield. And I think, you know, that's another thing that to me doesn't quite make sense, is that why they've gone into the market for a forward when, you know, as Theo mentioned, we've got sort of 6 attacking options when everyone's back and fighting fit. So there obviously is the money there. So it would be interesting to sort of to see what FSG's position is in terms of, you know, the funds available.
Yeah, of course. Is that the biggest worry about the midfield? Is it that, you know, that, and we'll come on to this a little bit more later on, but against Wolves of the day, Fabinho, Henderson and Thiago all started. They didn't particularly look fit, sharp, or let's be honest, very good. Is that the biggest worry? Is that, you know, Liverpool kind of got their first choice midfield fit, and it still doesn't look good enough, does it?
Yeah, when that Wolves team news dropped, I was looking at it thinking, okay, obviously no Van Dijk, but that's probably as strong as you can get at the moment, and it looked like a really strong side that was going to do the business against the Wolves team, who made quite a few changes, hadn't they? There was a couple in there who had never heard of it in the Wolves team, and I thought, well, this is the chance to maybe build a bit of momentum and confidence, and it just didn't happen at all. And it was a worry that it was Liverpool's, you know, on paper, I think maybe 8 or 9 out of 10 people would say that's Liverpool's best midfield 3. And they just look so devoid of energy and desire. I think Liverpool's problems go beyond just signing a central midfielder at the moment. I think if you look across all the kind of statistics and the numbers and the metrics from last season, they're all down, you know, aren't they? I think, you know, Andrew Beasley writes something this week that Liverpool's duels, you know, they're pretty much back to where they started under Klopp back in 2015, way down on what they were doing last season. There was a piece in the Times, I think it was last week, where, you know, Liverpool's running metrics were first and second and third in high distance sprints and distance covered and all that type of stuff, and now they're languishing down 15th, 16th. So the drop off has been remarkable, and Klopp actually admitted today, it's in the embargo section, so we can't kind of dwell on it too much at the moment, but he said he did kind of accept for the first time that last season's 63-game marathon campaign has had a knock-on effect, and we've known that he's kind of rejected that theory before. So with a handful of players, you know, I remember Fabinho doing it when we sat around with him in September or August. I think Trent's rejected it before as well. But, you know, if there is finally an acceptance that last season has led to this alarming drop-off, then that's a major concern. And I don't really know how you rectify that, to be honest, because, you know, Liverpool just had 6 weeks off there and they don't look any better for it. So while the addition of a midfielder would help, I don't think it's this kind of, you know, cure for all the ills that Liverpool have got at the moment. And that's probably the biggest worrying element at the moment.
Yeah, we'll just stay with the midfield, Theo. And we'll talk a bit about Darwin Nunes and the attack shortly. But as soon as we've talked about the midfield, yeah, that sort of first choice or most senior trio started against Wolves. I mean, Naby Keita is finally fit, has trained by the looks of things all week, and barring anything today or overnight, will be available tomorrow. Would you give him a start? He looked quite bright when he came off the bench against Wolves. Is this the sort of game that would suit him?
I don't think it really matters whether it suits him or not. You're at this stage now where Liverpool have to start him. If he's fit, he's the only midfielder they've got at a peak age. And while he has been coming back from this injury, he's had half a season off. So he's not going to be as tired as the others. And they've tried so many combinations and it's just not worked, as we've just covered there. The 3 that started against Wolves should be, on paper, that first choice, strongest front 3. midfield three. It's just not anymore. Maybe it can be later in the season. Maybe it's a confidence thing, or they just need to get it going again, get it to click. But at the moment, it's not working. So you want to try something new in there. And really, that you have to go to experienced options, because you can't really trust Harvey Elliott back in there or Fabio Carvalho, because they've shown that they're very raw. You need someone who's got a bit more physicality about them and has got that experience who can get Liverpool over the line. Like, when we think of Liverpool having their harder moments before under Jurgen Klopp, that's been a time when he's gone back to his experienced players, the tried and trusted ones who've got that little bit of know-how and can get back to form. The only problem is now it is those players who are letting him down. Like, we've not seen enough from, say, a Henderson, for example, and it would be a big ask to throw a James Milner in there just back in training when he's, 37? So that leaves you with Naby Keita or Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain, who've probably been the two most impressive players since the restart. We've got this point to prove with the contracts expiring. Legs are fresher than others, but you're not going to be able to play Oxlade-Chamberlain in midfield because he's going to be needed for the front three with Nunes out. Curtis Jones, I think he's still finding his way back, isn't he, a bit from injury? He played for the under-21s last week. So ball's in your court, Naby. Stay fit and show us what you can do for 6 months. But we've said this so many times before. I think Liverpool had injuries, didn't they, before the United game back in, was it September? I think, right, Naby Keita's got to start here. They don't have any other midfield options. And then he went and got injured himself. And they went and lost at Old Trafford. And we've said this so many times in his Liverpool career. When they've needed him, that it seems when he has these setbacks. But what does the future hold for Naby Keita? Like, is he going for a new Liverpool contract, or does he want to just go somewhere fresh in the summer and try and pick up, I don't know, back in Germany? But for now, he's a Liverpool player. He's got 5-6 months where he can end his Liverpool career on his terms. Like, if he comes in and helps them get into a top four, it doesn't matter whether he goes or not. He has done his part. He can hold his head up high. He's won pretty much every major honour going. Just don't let us down with injuries. He's got a bit of mobility about him. He's at that peak age. He can get forward and run at defences. We know he's got the ability to get back as well. It's just about someone who can offer that all-round package that the current options are somewhat lacking. And we're almost in that situation now where which one of them do you take out of that three from last week? Because you could say Fabinho and Henderson, they've not been up to it much. But do they just revert back to what they were like when Klopp first took over, when it is that energy and pressing, when it doesn't have to be pretty, it's just winning the balls back? And that means, well, maybe Thiago's the one you take out. As talented a player he is, as great as he is on the ball, there have been games recently where you looked at him and think, you are not what Liverpool need in this situation. Why are you slowing it down and passing it back to Alisson? They need to be pressing teams, winning it back, and all this sort of thing. Thiago doesn't do that. He was brought in to be this, not plan B, but this different option for Liverpool so they could play in a different way. And now they don't need to play a different way. They need to play in the way that was successful from the very beginning. And it might not be the most glamorous, but they've just got to revert to that type.
Theo just touched on it there, Beth, but Keita, in theory, he does bring energy, and he sort of performs well in some of the metrics that Gorst mentioned earlier. Liverpool coming up against a team tomorrow who are upwardly mobile, who've won games against, impressively against Everton recently, against Man City, I think, before the break, and just feel like they play with energy, with desire. They're going to need that, aren't they? Does he feel like the right fit there? I mean, I know it's a bit of a weird one, Keita, and this feels like a bit of a tired conversation because I feel like deja vu. We've had this so many times, but the time finally could be right for him, or am I getting carried away?
I mean, time will tell after tomorrow, I think. But I'd love him to kick on. I mean, I always think back to that game last season at Old Trafford, and he was absolutely superb. For me, that was probably one of his best performances in a Liverpool shirt, and I think he showed the sort of what he offers that's a little bit different in terms of, he obviously got forward, he got that goal, he got an assist. Liverpool, even at the very best under Jurgen Klopp, are quite notorious for not having too many goals and assists from midfield. So he does offer that. He offers something a little bit different. I think really when you look at some of the performances from the past few weeks, it can't get much worse. So I think there's no harm in trying Keita, but he is an incredibly frustrating player because he comes in and he does a good job, and he has a run of maybe 2, 3, 4 games and then he's out again. And we've had this conversation so many times about him, and I'd love it to be that he comes in and kicks on and does well from tomorrow and until the end of the season. But if I'm being 100% honest, I don't think he's the solution for Liverpool. I can't see him sort of, leading them to on a top 4 charge. But who knows? I think definitely if he is fit, fingers crossed, then start him tomorrow, because that midfield last week just looked devoid of any creativity and like Gorsty said, desire as well. And I think, Keita's got a bit of a point to prove, and maybe that might help a little bit as well. So, who knows?
Well, it sounds like Jurgen Klopp's going to have to find the solutions from within his squad. So we'll have to hope that Naby Keita is fit and available, and perhaps is that. Gorsty, one person who may not be fit and available tomorrow is Darwin Nunes. Give us a little bit of an update on him from this week, and also give us your thoughts on how Liverpool's attack could look should he not be available.
Yeah, Klopp was quite vague actually. I think he just said he hasn't trained much this week, so we'll see how it goes. But then, kind of towards the back end of the press conference, almost forgot that he said that, and just said Darwin's out tomorrow. And so we're not really sure what's gone on with him. We're told that it's a minor problem, and he hasn't trained too much this week, and that's the reason that he might not make Saturday's game. But my problem is Liverpool are always kind of keen to tell you that it's not that big an issue, and before you know it, players have missed weeks, months. I seem to remember the Joe Matip one a while ago, and before you know it, he's missed a couple of months. I remember Thiago when he had that injury when Richarlison did him in the derby. That derby was October the 16th, I think, and he didn't play again until after Christmas. And at the time, they were just making out it was just an impact injury and only a minor one. Before you know it, he's out for 2.5 months. Firmino's missed 5 games, and we were told before the City game in the Carabao Cup that they were still hopeful of him, playing a part in the festive period. So I'm hesitant to think that it is only a minor one and it'll all be fine. And, if he doesn't play tomorrow, we'll be playing on Tuesday against Wolves. But you just never know anymore with the way Liverpool are. I think they're just a little bit concerned that, putting fuel onto the fire that's already there around injuries is probably not a wise move on their part, because we know that fans are always on the cusp of a meltdown, aren't they, when someone new's injured, and Liverpool have had terrible luck on the injury front, certainly this season, and probably for about 2.5 years now, to be honest. So we'll see. But in terms of the front line, it's difficult, isn't it? Because there's only Gakpo and Salah who are senior members of the squad. Does he go with Ben Doak and play Salah down the middle, or go with a 2 up front and kind of revert back to the diamond that he played at Ajax?
Played there, couldn't he, I suppose? Yeah,
we could just see him coming back in on the left maybe, and Cody Gakpo going down the middle. His Premier League debut, that is one option actually, yeah. But it's not ideal, is it, when you've got Firmino, Jota, Diaz and Nunes all out, and you go into somewhere like Brighton, who are playing some of the best football in the country at the moment.
Just staying with you, Gorst, I mean, I don't really like speculating on these things because it's very hard to know. But is it a slight concern that we've seen Diaz come back in the World Cup break in Liverpool's training camp, seem to get re-injured, and it almost seems to be worse now, and he's out for much longer. And then Klopp alluded to basically the similar happening with Firmino. There does seem to be an issue with injuries at Liverpool. I mean, they're not their only team. Chelsea have got 9, 10, 11 injuries that are mounting up, but this season has just been relentless, and you don't seem to get through a week, do you, without someone missing training, someone having a minor niggle that turns into something bigger. It's a frustration that fans have, and there does seem to be something not quite right about Liverpool and fitness at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of fans point to the fact that there's no club doctor or there wasn't a club doctor for a while, but I don't think that's the root cause of it. I think it might just be down to the intensity of the training, and it's non-negotiable. Like, Klopp feels you can't really turn down the intensity of it because that's how they play and that's absolutely how they need to be on a match day. But Liverpool's injury luck has been awful, and it goes beyond just being bad luck because there are that many different injuries to different players. I think it's just must be something with what they're doing week to week, but as we don't see it, we can't really speculate too much. And I can certainly understand why fans are really frustrated about the amount of injuries that are cropping up, because they just never seem to to have eased all season. You know, since Jota got re-injured actually in Thailand. Since then, Oxlade-Chamberlain got injured, then Thiago got injured. I don't think Henderson's been fit most of the season. I think you can go throughout the whole squad, and the only player off the top of my head who's been fit throughout it all is Mo Salah. Robertson was out for a few weeks, wasn't he? Trent, I think, was injured for a bit. Firmino's out at the moment. I think they could have had
Elliott and Gomez. Only two. Other two.
I think they've had 20 players or more, haven't they, who've missed at least one game this season through injury, and that's just an incredible statistic.
Yeah, I mean, it is strange, isn't it? Liverpool have had a lot of injuries. Coming up against Brighton this weekend, then, Theo, I mean, I always get a bit frustrated when Liverpool play Brighton because Klopp always makes them out to be like their Barcelona, and they always seem to cause Liverpool loads of problems. And they did in October when they drew 3-3. Trossard, who scored a hat-trick in that game, won't play after having a bit of a fallout with his manager. But what is it about Brighton that seems to hurt Liverpool so much? I mean, I did make up that they beat Man City. They beat Chelsea 4-1. They lost to Man City, but they gave a good account of themselves against Arsenal. And of course, I watched a bit of that game at Goodison Park the week before last, and they just absolutely pulled Everton apart. And they looked like the type of team that could hurt Liverpool with quick runners, with technical players. So maybe I've just described it, but what is it about Brighton that just doesn't seem to mesh well with Liverpool?
Well, Klopp pretty much covered it, didn't he, last week in the post-match press conference? He said if we defend like this at Brighton, we might as well not turn up because they're a team that play proper football. You think their formation, where it's the 5-man defence, but they've got the bodies in midfield, they've got this great work rate, risk of sounding like Beth Lindop here, but they've got a very clear identity and their intensity is very good. It's like a lower level Liverpool, and they're still very good at what they do. The fact that they could lose such a promising manager in Graham Potter and just be as good as they were before. And they've lost a few key players along the way as well. And they've invested really wisely. Like, it's not as though they've gone and splashed the cash on one big player and it's not gone well. They've lost Ben White, Basuma, and you think, well, they've still got so many players that you'd happily snap up if you're a big six club, from Alexis McAllister, World Cup winner, Caicedo, we keep seeing Liverpool linked with. I'm sure Trossard has his suitors, which is part of the reason why he's fallen out with the manager now. But they're just this very good Premier League side these days. And because it's still this smaller name, they're not an established Premier League name. You look down on Brighton and think, oh, they're really going to be in the bottom half of the table. That they play a nice bit of football, but it won't get them results. But it does get them results, and it has for a number of years now. Like, they are a mid-table Premier League team. And if it wasn't a big six in Newcastle, they would be pushing for Europe. There's no reason why they can't one year have a good domestic cup run or maybe sneak into the European places. But they're going to happen. I suppose what's going to happen to them is what happens to a lot of teams in this situation. The best players are snapped up one by one, and eventually it's too much. Like we saw it with Southampton when Liverpool just went shopping on the South Coast year after year then. But for Brighton's sake, you hope that they can keep it together. Just touching back on the injuries, it's quite telling, I suppose, when you look at the big six. Liverpool and Chelsea, as you said, those are the ones with the most injuries. But the likes of Arsenal, City, United, Spurs, have only got 2 or 3 really. Maybe it's a bit of a leap, but Chelsea and Liverpool are the two that are in the most European Cup finals or Europa League finals. Those are the ones who've campaigns over the last few years. They've always had that bit more stress in it. They've gone that much further in competitions, and then they've had to go out to Dubai or Qatar, wherever it is, to play the Club World Cup. They're playing that much more football, and it does take its toll. And this is something where you can say Jurgen Klopp's been spot on for a number of years now. Footballers play too much football, and they're just piling it on with international tournaments. And you're looking at players now in midfield for Liverpool who you expect them to be still at their peak, but they've played so much, maybe it has just taken its toll, and that's why we're seeing this side slowing down somewhat. But yeah, it's quite telling when you look at the table. Liverpool 7th, Chelsea, are they still 10th? Then they've got so many more injuries than the rest of them. And the others, they're fine. They're the ones who are storming away in the top 4 race.
Well, the Chelsea result last night was good for Liverpool, wasn't it? Because it sort of...
It wasn't until your eyes film overtook it.
Yeah, I know. And Chelsea don't... I suppose they don't feel in terms of the table like a rival, Beth, but they you would still count them as one of the teams that are Liverpool's main rivals for a top 4 spot, along with Tottenham, Man United, and Newcastle. But going back to Brighton, I just wanted to talk about some of their players. Moses Caicedo, I can never pronounce his name properly, but he seems to be a man that a lot of people are talking about this season. Obviously, he's been with Liverpool because he's a midfielder and they're desperate for one. Have you seen much of him this season? If you have you been impressed by him? I mean, he's got quite an interesting career because he spent a bit of last season out on loan, came back, and seems to have burst into life this year. But he's yet to make too many appearances for Brighton.
Yeah, it seems like he's had a bit of a meteoric rise this season, doesn't it? He's only is he 21? He's very young, isn't he?
Yeah.
But you watched him against, saw a little bit of him against Everton the other week, and he just absolutely ran the show and looked sort of, if you could, collate a player who had all the attributes that you feel like Liverpool need right now in terms of a midfield signing, he would absolutely be it. And obviously that's why Liverpool have been linked with him for quite a while. But he's a superb signing. Obviously, as you say, he's not even made that many Premier League appearances, so time will tell if it's a bit of a purple patch or whether that continues. But he certainly looks like the real deal at the moment. And I think, like Theo said, it's a testament to how well Brighton have recruited. Really, they just show what can be done if you get the right people, in the boardroom. And they're a team that whenever I see Liverpool are about to play them, I do feel that sort of sense of dread a little bit. They have sort of the last few years become a bit of a bogey team for Liverpool. I think Liverpool have one win in 5 or something like that against them in the last 5 games, and at the moment feel like exactly the sort of team that you don't want Liverpool to play because of the energy, the tempo that they play at, like as you said, sort of the technical players that they've got. But yeah, they've got some really, really fantastic players, and it's going to be a really tricky game tomorrow.
Random one, Gorsty, but Klopp was asked, wasn't he, today about Brighton's recruitment and being able to pull players out of South America, like Caicedo. I think I've pronounced his name several different times within about 2 minutes. But I mean, is it just a case that players like him wouldn't get the time or the space to learn on the job at Liverpool, or is that something? If Liverpool can't financially compete with the Man Cities of this world, then is that something Liverpool need to sort of try and get better at, getting those players out of South America before they, because if you want to sign him now, he's going to cost 60, 70, 80 million, perhaps. Do Liverpool need to sort of start beating those teams to the punch a bit?
It's tough, isn't it? Because, he's earning rave reviews, this lad, but if Brighton lost 3-4 in a row, no one a bat an eyelid. If that happens at Liverpool, he's right under the microscope and he's getting questions asked. Is he good enough? And whatever else. So the levels of expectations are just so different. It's difficult to see Liverpool, doing a Brighton, if you like, and bringing in these relatively unknown players and thrusting them straight into the Liverpool first team, and there we go. Liverpool. Everyone who Liverpool signed, people know they are, don't they? Football fans. They don't necessarily have to have followed Cody Gakpo's career inside and out, but when Liverpool were linked with him, or when it became clear that Liverpool had stolen the march on him on Boxing Day, everyone knew who he was, didn't he? I think if you look across, even going back to Ibrahim Konate when Liverpool signed him from RB Leipzig, everyone knew who he was, didn't he? He was Leipzig centre back who played against him in the Champions League, and alongside him and Upamecano was kind of one of the emerging centre-backs in the Bundesliga. So I can't really see Liverpool, tweaking their model to do that kind of thing just because of the difference in demands at the clubs. But yeah, Klopp was asked about Brighton's success, and to be fair to them, they're probably one of the most well-run clubs in England, aren't they? The way they operate, don't tend to spend, money that they don't have. They play attractive football. Okay, they might have had accusations of being, missing a goal scorer for quite a few years, but the way they've kind of built themselves up in recent years has been hugely admirable and fair play to them. It's kind of the way you're meant to do it, isn't it? But they do always tend to give Liverpool a right go, don't they? A good, proper challenge when Liverpool play against them. I think they drew the last 2 at Anfield. Liverpool won there in March.
2-7 and 3-3, wasn't it, the Anfield game?
Liverpool were absolutely. I know when they were in that run where they were just beating everyone every week. So it'll be a tough one tomorrow. And I quite like Brighton. They're likeable, aren't they? But I won't like them for 90 minutes tomorrow afternoon.
Yeah.
Well,
sorry,
well, like saying, why aren't Liverpool signing these players now? Why aren't they getting them ahead of it? Well, this has been a long-term thing. If we think back to some of the signings they have made, like Mohamed Salah, they could have got him for 12 million when he went to Chelsea. Sadio Mane, they could have got him for 12 million when he went to Southampton. Van Dijk, 12 million or something, I think, when he went to Southampton. And there's a number of players in this squad who've played for Liverpool in recent years, who they have been watching for a long, long time, and they haven't taken that gamble because they're not quite ready to be Liverpool players. Like they nearly did take the gamble with Salah when he went to Chelsea, and they just missed out. And we saw how his Chelsea career panned out. They need to play that bit more football. They need to get that exposure at the higher level. Yeah. And the gamble is, well, if you leave them, then you're having to pay 50, 60, 70, 80 million to get them to your club. You either gamble and wait and have to pay that much more, or you gamble and bring them in and you're the ones in charge of their development. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. As Chelsea have found out, we think Kevin De Bruyne, you can throw that at them as well. I suppose one example for Liverpool is they got Joe Gomez early, 3.5 million. If he'd gone into Southampton, Brighton, one of those sorts of clubs, and established himself as one of the best English centre-backs around, playing week after week for 4 or 5 seasons, he'd be spending so much for him now, and he'd be so praised, so lauded that everyone would want a piece of this. But Liverpool fans they write him off a little bit. They take him for granted because he's been there so long. It's just one of the perils of the way they invest in their squad. You need that bit of success. You need the players to be ready to come and make an instant impact, as we're seeing now, because if they're not ready to make the instant impact, you're stuck in transition. But that means that you are spending that bit much more on them, as opposed to getting them 2-3 years earlier when you could have got them for a fraction of the fee.
I think, like Gorst, you said as well, sorry, Joe, like in terms of, when you're playing for Brighton, you are maybe afforded that little bit more time. There's not as much scrutiny on you week in, week out. It's like, if you look at Harvey Elliott now, he's come in for quite a lot of criticism in the last couple of months because he's been starting for Liverpool's first team week in, week out. And you think, he's only a young player and he's, maybe if he was at a Brighton or a Fulham and they weren't in the spotlight as much and they had these, few standout performances or they were defying expectations, then maybe sort of the narrative surrounding a player like him, a young player, would be very different. So I think that is, as Gorsty said, quite a difficult sort of balance to strike between getting those young players in, but also making sure that they are ready to do a job when they do come into the starting 11.
Can you not do a bit of both though? Can you not recruit players and perhaps loan them and carefully manage them and still buy players to compete? I mean, off the top of my head, I don't know how much Saicedo cost. There's another different pronunciation of his name, Brighton, but you could surely shop in those types of markets and buy those types of players, perhaps loan them to another Premier League club. There are ways of doing it, isn't there? I mean, I also was sort of alluding to South America, especially because we've seen Man City, for example, buy Jesus and Alvarez, both players who, all right, cost a bit more, sort of 20, 25 million. But still, in the grand scheme of things these days, that's not that much money. But we don't see Liverpool often go into the South American market anymore. And I just wonder whether that's an area we could see them exploit more in the future. But look, we've run out of time. So Beth, I wanted to come to you. Liverpool Women did make a signing this week and they returned to action on Sunday with the small matter of Manchester United. Can you tell us a bit more about that and how they are coming back into the league season?
Yeah, so they've had a pretty prolonged winter break. I think they last played, I think it was December the 3rd or the 4th against West Ham. Huge win for them. It was only the second win of the season, but probably the most complete performance and a sign. I think probably the first time I've watched them this season and thought 100% think they'll be safe this season. They're now 8 points clear of Leicester at the bottom of the table, but it will be a real test for them on Sunday. I mean, that rivalry obviously is Manchester United, but in terms of the women's side, they've not actually played each other since 2019. So, the rivalry isn't sort of as long established as on the men's side, but it'll be a really tricky game. United are chasing the Champions League spots and in absolutely superb form as well. So it'll be a real test. But they've made a couple of additions to the squad. They signed Gemma Bonner, who was captain Liverpool to back-to-back WSL titles in 2013 and 2014. So she's back, central defender, which is sort of that signing makes a little bit more sense after the news yesterday that Gilly Flaherty had retired from professional football. She's obviously centre half and played a lot for Liverpool in the first part of the season, but she lost her dad very sadly and unexpectedly before Christmas, and has made the decision to hang up her boots. So Gemma Bonner coming in will help sort of fill that void. And then Sophie Lundgaard has been brought in, young Denmark youth international, in midfield as well. She's only 20 and obviously her first move to the WSL, but it'd be interesting to see how she kicks on during the second half of the season.
All right, cheers, Beth. And you'll be covering that game, won't you, Sunday?
I will, yeah. You can keep up to date with it all on the Echo's website.
Great. Okay, well, before we depart, let's pick our teams and let's try and predict the result tomorrow. Gorst, I'll start with you. Back four, same. Well, we'll take the goalkeeper as red, but back four, is it same as Wolves?
Yeah, I mean, the only two options you'd have really is Simicast for Robertson, and I don't really see the point in doing that when Liverpool haven't played for a week. And Gomez for one of Matip or Canate, and again, I don't really see much point in that one either. So, as you were for the Wolves game.
So, what's your midfield three then? Assuming it's a three, of course, because he's changed formation before at Brighton, hasn't he?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I don't think Liverpool have got the amount of numbers to go with the kind of four up top. I just think sticking with it for tomorrow, because I don't think they can be quite as collectively bad as they were at Wolves. That midfield three, Thiago was off the pace, wasn't he? Henderson was really poor, and Fabinho was kind of continuing a theme of his season, really. But surely they might be able to put in a little bit more of an improved performance tomorrow afternoon. I don't really. There's not too many other options. I mean, I'm leaning more and more against putting Harvey Elliott in midfield as the season goes on, because I just don't think he offers any kind of physicality or protection that Liverpool's defence needs, and that's not necessarily his fault. He's not that type of player. But at a time when you've got to roll your sleeves up and really dig in and grind it out, I don't think he's probably someone you want in the centre of the park.
What about yours, Theo?
Midfield? Or do you want the whole lot? Hop to it.
Your midfield.
Keita comes in. Keita starts. Yeah. I was going to play safe and keep Thiago in and then have one of Fabinho or Henderson, but I think Gorsty's just talked me into taking Thiago out when you need that physicality and to be not as pretty, just to grind it out. So we'll go Henderson can keep his place. Fabinho as a 6, just to see if that works, because it's not something we've really seen before. Maybe being nitty-gritty might get him back, but it is a case of they're running out of options in midfield now. You're just relying on something new to suddenly click. I know the argument for doing tried and trusted and hoping that they can play their way back into form, but I think it was the first choice 3 against Brighton for the 3-3. That might have been like the second time we'd saw them that season, and they got overrun in that one as well. So hopefully something a bit different does pay off.
Beth?
Yeah, I'll probably go with same as Theo, bring Keita in for Thiago, and then go with Henderson and Fabinho as well.
Yeah, I too would bring Keita in for Thiago. I think Thiago's looked slightly off the pace in recent weeks and perhaps a little bit leggy as well, and that midfield needs freshening up. Okay, Gorsty, your attack then. This is probably the hardest one, isn't it? You know, I mean, you mentioned Ben Doak before. That would be quite exciting, but is it also a bit wild?
Yeah, I think it would be. As much as I'd like to see him thrown into the thick of it, and I think he'd handle it quite well. He's a fearless young lad who wouldn't be too overawed, but I just think Liverpool need the senior players, don't they? And I'd actually forgotten about Oxlade-Chamberlain. I think it might be time for him to reprise that left wing role. And Cody Gakpo starts down the middle. Probably not his favourite position. We know he likes to operate off the left, but let's face it, Liverpool don't have too many options, do they? So Oxlade-Chamberlain on the left, Gakpo in the middle, and Salah on the right.
Theo?
Yeah, I agree. I think you hold Doak back for Wolves away in the cup replay. I know Klopp went full strength for that original tie, but that's with a bit of space going into it, as opposed to in between 2 big Premier League games. As I said earlier, Oxlade-Chamberlain's not let anyone down so far this, or since the restart, really. Gakpo down the middle, it's not ideal. He wasn't at his best there for Netherlands in the World Cup from what I saw, but who else do you have? And you have Salah on the right. The only other alternatives Carvalho, and I think he's in the same boat as Elliott. Like, he's a very raw youngster who is fine putting him into a winning team when they're doing well, but when they're not doing well, that's just putting unnecessary pressure on his shoulders. When he signed, we were told he could play as an 8, a 10, a winger, or up front. Well, at the moment, he just looks like a boy playing Premier League in a struggling team, trying to find his feet. He doesn't really know what he is, struggling with the physicality somewhat. So he can just have to do the substitute role again. You go for the 3 senior players available and hope that it clicks.
Beth, will you go along with that?
Yeah, I'd agree. I think Doak is probably the sort of player that if things aren't going well, you need a goal with 20 minutes to go, he might be better suited to coming off the bench and doing something there. I think he could definitely be involved tomorrow. But yeah, I'd start with Ox, Gakpo and Mo as well.
Do you know what? I'm going to mix it up a bit because I think Liverpool need a lift. I sometimes think these young teenagers, they come with no fear. They don't sort of look at the season as a whole. They just look at it as an opportunity. And I also think it might throw Brighton on their toes a bit because they wouldn't expect it. So having listened to all of your testaments there, I am, as the rule of this pod, I'm going to throw Doak in. So yeah, what I say goes. So Doak's in there, but we'll have your predictions and I'll decide whether they're right or wrong as well. So Gorsty, you can go first.
Do you know what? A lot depends actually on City United in the day. I think if City beat United, I think it's got to give Liverpool, it's got to galvanise Liverpool to go and close that gap, hasn't it? I'll say 2-1 Liverpool.
Positive, Theo?
I'm not feeling particularly positive. I did Brighton's pre-match podcast the other day, and I think I went for an optimistic 1-1 on that. So that's my optimistic offering, a 1-1. I wouldn't be surprised if they lost 2-0, but as with Blood Red, I'll stick with 1-0 for now.
Can you beat that?
I was going to say I'm not particularly confident, so I'm going to go for a draw. Let's go 2-2 to mix it up. But yeah, I'm going to go for a draw.
Yeah, I hate being negative with my prediction because it just doesn't feel right. But I'm going to go with you, Beth, and say a 2-2 just because they seem to score a few against each other, don't they? Brighton and Liverpool. But yeah, I don't know. Just something.
Maybe you should do what I did. Was it for the Man City game where I said they'd lose like 5-0? That it's not going to happen. So we'll just go for something really negative and hope that inspires them to victory because they obviously watch our podcast.
I hope that they listen rather than watch so that they don't see me in my scruffs. So there you go. Let's just hope that Gorsty's right and Theo, Beth and myself are all wrong tomorrow. The Reds hit back with a bang, and then we'll be back on Monday to discuss that game and look forward to the FA Cup replay with Wolves. Have a good weekend. Ta-ra.